You're watching Caribbean Vibrations, TV's #1 Caribbean show. I'm your host, Guide Allen, and today's episode is all about the Children's Aid Society of Toronto and the agency's programs geared towards supporting African, Black, and Caribbean communities within the child welfare system. We speak with key representatives, individuals, community agencies about the disproportionate number of African, Black, Caribbean families negatively impacted by the Children's Aid Society of Toronto and why these programs are necessary and had to be created. Stay tuned to learn more.
Going into care was traumatic, and I feel even now that it was uncalled for and a little over-eager, over-aggressive to get me into care when I felt maybe care wasn't the best option for me.
I was bounced around from a good number of different homes and foster homes and group homes and placements, and it was quite a journey, and me having a very strong kind of family ties and upbringing and a very clear sense of culture and identity, for that to be kind of stripped away from me in a blink of an eye really had a very negative kind of impact on my character and my upbringing.
The Children's Aid Society of Toronto has acknowledged the disparity, the disproportionality, and the discrimination in child welfare services directed towards African, Caribbean, and Black families in Toronto. Well, frankly, it was about time. It's 2020, we're in the city of Toronto, and we had our own research reports, and we saw the results. And we've heard from families and from community, and we know that it was time to respond so that we can change the outcomes for the families that we serve from the Black, African, Caribbean community. We also want to reach out to the community of service providers and connect families with them and help families take care of their own children.
We want to champion diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the reason we have that as a priority and a strategic direction is that we understand that as a Children's Aid Society, we have intersected with marginalized populations in a way that has caused those populations harm. We have disproportionate outcomes in terms of our work, specifically with the African Canadian community. And we want to ensure that the outcomes for that community are strong and positive, and that children are able to remain at home and in their community. And that is really what our hope is to strengthen families, build family capacity, and to work together with families so that children can stay at home. We want to help families protect their own children rather than protecting children from their families.
Words can't really describe it, you know, because I feel that a lot of unresolved issues, not really even unresolved issues, rather, a lot of issues that were created by me even going in the system are still relevant today in terms of, you know, where I am in my life. And to be honest, I'm just not happy.
Children's Aid Society is the only child welfare agency in North America that has anti-Black racism practice integration leads, ABR leads for short. There are 6 positions across the agency, and collectively as a group, our responsibility is to interrupt, is to ensure that we're holding the agency accountable in terms of changing its relationship and accountability to the Black community. We're leading learning sessions where we're talking about implicit bias, where we're talking about historical, structural, institutional racism and its impact on the Black community. We're talking about the importance of culture and identity. One of the 6 manifestations of anti-Black racism is the erasure of culture and identity. So when we're bringing Black children and youth into care, we're cutting them off from their community, we're cutting them off from their family. So when we're having conversations with workers, we're making sure that we're grounding it in their roots and who they are, and making sure that they have a sense of community. That means we're preparing them for bias in terms of navigating a community, navigating systems, navigating institutions who view them in stereotypical ways. We're making sure that they are connected to family, we're connected to community, and have a strong sense of self.
When I think about the CAS, I think of being misunderstood, misinterpreted, and misguided, because you don't get a lot of supervision or a lot of rules or a positive outcome. You just get apprehended and you're in a state of suspense right through. CAS had the right idea, but the wrong approach, I must say.
So the Kapanya project started in 2018 here at the organization with the delivery of trauma-informed, culturally specific services to the Black community. The emphasis behind it was really a way in which we were looking at building community partnerships, building capacity, and looking at strength-based practice and looking at doing our work differently within the Black community. It's a joint partnership between the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, CAFCAN Social Services, and also with Jean Tweed. We were extremely intentional in the naming of the project because we felt it would be very important, the naming behind it. So it is called Kapanya, which means healing in Swahili, which we know is extremely important to the Black community and the individuals, the families, the children that we service. This project is extremely important because it really speaks to the agency's ongoing commitment to address anti-Black racism and to address disproportionality of Black African Caribbean families that come to the attention of the child welfare system.
I believe that this initiative has created an opportunity for Black families to rebuild a sense of control and empowerment for them in their lives and in their children's lives. This program has allowed mothers to feel a sense of control and self-love and value for themselves, and it's so important that actually, since the women, for example, who have gone through this session, they've contacted me and asked me, how do I get services for themselves and their families through CAFCAN services, or even after the program, they've gone into the community and talked to their neighbors, their parents, their family members, and calling me and getting resources for them so that they can have services as well.
I think some of the most profound impacts that we've seen have come from stories and feedback that have come from the mothers themselves who are participating in the program. They have told us that they've really enjoyed it. They've enjoyed having the opportunity to interact with CAS staff on a different level. They've enjoyed having the program being held at CAFCAN, which we've heard from the moms is a safe space, considered to be a safe space for them, to be able to interact with other Black mothers, to share their experiences of trauma, to learn to heal, to be able to cope with their trauma, and to have the program being delivered by Black staff in a safe space, and everything that they've learned so far. I think those are the most profound experiences that have come out of Kapanya, just the feedback that we've received from the participants themselves, and the feedback is really positive. So those are some of the stories that I would say have come out of the Kapanya project.
Kinship impacts African, Black, and Caribbean families because it allows for children to stay within their familial setting. It allows for children to have their nutritional needs met in terms of they understand the food that's being put in front of them. It allows for their hygiene needs to be met, whether it's through the skincare regimen for a lot of Black children, which is very different from other races and cultures. It allows for children to be able to grow and continue to be with people who know them, whether that's going to be their grandma, grandpa, whether that's their aunts or uncles, adult siblings, their cousins. It gives the child a sense of familiarity, it gives them a sense of belonging, as opposed to if they were in a foster home where they may not understand what's going on, they may not understand the people that's around them. Just because it could be a racial matched foster home doesn't necessarily mean it's a cultural match, and that cultural piece is just as important as the racial factor as well. The Children's Aid Society of Toronto has been honest in their numbers and stating that, there's been an overrepresentation of Black youth in our care. There has been an overrepresentation of the Black families that we work with, considering they only make up 8% of the city's population, yet they make up just over 24% of the families that are serviced. Having kinship allows for the alternative to foster care, which has been at the forefront of part of the society's work over the years, to allow for the work to be done to keep children within their communities, within their cultures, and with their race, has been a huge factor and a huge part of the society's agenda in moving forward and being able to work better with the Black community.
Soul Journey is a program that was initiated and started by Black employees in the agency to address what we found as what we thought was the need to ensure Black children and youth growing up in care had a sense of identity, connected to history, and raised expectations. The trip Soul Journey takes place annually, once a year. We have 30 children and youth, Black youth, who participate between the ages of 14 to 17, and we travel to different parts of North America and the Caribbean. We have traveled to New York, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Alabama. We visited Nova Scotia 3 times. We had a local trip in Toronto. In terms of the feedback that we get from young people who've participated in the trip is a sense of community, a sense of belonging, a connection to their Blackness in a way that they had not experienced before while growing up in care. I had one young man who participated on 3 Soul Journey trips. He started at the age of 14 and participated until he's 17, now at U of T, and he looks back on that experience as being the turning point, a pivotal turning point in his life in terms of connection to his community and a connection to him and raised expectations about, I'm going to make something of myself, and feeling as though I have a community that supports me and expects this from me.
My Soul Journey experience was definitely inspirational. At the age of 4, I was taken into care and I was never exposed to Black people. I was put into a white foster home for approximately 12 years and I never was exposed to Black excellence. I was never exposed to resilience. I was never exposed to my own kind, my culture for a very long time. So when I went into Soul Journey, I experienced my culture, I experienced what it's like to be Black, I experienced what it's like not to be ashamed of who I was. So some of the activities that we did on the Soul Journey trip was being exposed to our food, being exposed to our culture, whether it was going to the museum, going to the Black communities, speaking with youth that were our age that were also in Children's Aid Society, as well as just sharing our different experiences, what it's like being Black in the community, whether it was racism that we faced, whether it was just inequalities as well, and opportunities that we really didn't have. I think that programs like Soul Journey are extremely important because when I came back from my first Soul Journey trip, I advocated to be placed out of the group home that I was currently in into a Black foster home, which I never experienced. So then when I eventually moved into Black foster home, I was exposed to resilience. I was exposed to my foster home working 2 jobs, providing for us. I was exposed to my culture. I was exposed to what it's like to be a Black person in general. So when I left Soul Journey, I was able to advocate for what I want instead of being put into white foster homes, instead of being isolated. That's what I was getting instead. So when I left, it just really changed me, and I felt like I had more say, I had more power within myself.
The Karynda program, it's a 17-week program that focuses on 2 main core elements. One being engagement of fathers to be responsible and accountable for behaviors. And the second part, engaging fathers to be part of families. History has shown that when fathers perpetrate violence, it was basically they were kept out of the family home or kept out of the picture, and we just focused on working with the mother and children to keep child safety. And we have realized that do not work for families. Fathers are very important in a child's life. So that engagement piece is, again, engaging in accountability for your behavior, but also engaging you to be part of your family and take responsibility for raising your children. So it's very important, I would say, and underlying very important for African, Caribbean, and Black fathers to be given space, such as the Karyndas. When we approach such issue or such topic, we start off from the lens of equity. Yeah? And once you have equity, it's basically seeing another human being. So despite what that person did, if you can see the person as a human being, you can then work on behavior, okay? For many of our African, Caribbean, and Black fathers, elephant in the room, experience systemic racism, okay? So when you're working with systems as child welfare, we know who have done damage, we have the police, the schools, but also that reducing that fear of system. For many Black racialized fathers, that fear of the system. If I was to openly disclose to my CS worker or to the police or to my probation officer, this is what really happened, this is what I did, that fear of judgment, how the Black community is seen in terms of Black fathers especially, is angry and violent. Having fathers giving that father that space, giving that opportunity to be honest with themselves, to be vulnerable, and to be able to take on board information to be better fathers. In my experience running the Karynda program, you have many Black fathers want to be inclusive in their child's life, want to be better fathers, but because of the fear of the system and consequences, they have that fear, so they not engage. When you give people a space, basically you're opening it up to basically be yourself and be vulnerable, to learn and grow, to be involved in your kid's life.
The transition from say yes to care to independent living, it really needs to be focused. It really needs to be looked at. It really needs to be improved, because youth are just not doing good. I could put on a smile and I could joke, I could laugh, I could be jovial. But when I go home at nighttime and I look at my my life, I'm just not happy.
The Journey to Zero is a collaboration between the Children's Aid Society of Toronto and the Children's Aid Foundation of Canada. We were asked if we could dream, what would we envision? And we envisioned a system that did not protect children through investigation, but a system that protected children by building family capacity and building family systems, and where we fundamentally believe that children belong at home. So the 0 represents the fact that we do not want to raise any children, and we want to ensure that no children age out of care. So the 0 represents this notion of permanency, that children should have permanency in their homes and in their families.
So I came into the Children's Aid Society of Toronto's care when I was 13 years old, when my mom's abusive common law partner murdered my mom and grandmother, attempted to kill me, then took his own life. And my brother just turned 18 about a week after they passed away, and he ended up becoming my guardian. I don't think any 18-year-old knows how to become a parent overnight with no warning and little to no support. So I think Journey to Zero, especially the kin intensive support services, for example, through a kin searcher, assessor, and a support services worker would have been able to help us find a relative, another family member, or maybe even a community member to take us into their home and raise us both. And to create a family and community-based safety plan that involves accessing faith group support, school supports, or any other supports available in the community. And my brother and I really didn't have those type of supports, and so I didn't feel well supported by the system at the time, but I do know and believe that, Children's Aid Foundation of Canada and the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, they are really invested in helping families to raise their own children rather than being taken into a system and being raised in a system by a system.
I would say that our future goal between the Children's Aid Society and the African Caribbean community is we really want to build trust with the community. We want the community to understand that our primary goal is to ensure that children can stay at home and in their communities. We know that governments and systems cannot raise children, and we know that the outcomes for those children are really poor. We really want to build trust between ourselves and the African Caribbean community so that community sees us as a source of support and help and sees us as an organization that is genuinely invested in the success of their family.
Well, frankly, the outcomes for children and youth have always been important to me in my career. So when I came to the agency and I saw the hard, cold data, I really wanted to help the agency radically change this practice of child welfare so that we could truly support families, allow them to raise their own children, connect them to community service providers, and make this an agency that people want to come towards instead of run away from for service.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Caribbean Vibrations, coming to you from downtown Toronto, Canada. Don't forget to check us out on social media at caribvibetv and visit our website, caribbeanvibrationstv.com. I'm your host, Scott Allen, and we'll see you next week on Caribbean Vibrations.
This love is real. Girl, you possess the charm that keep me warm. Do it!